Hello, we're going to focus today on the governance structure of the IOCC. Our text will be the IOCC's Constitution and Canon Law, and you'll want to open it up to page 8, section 3, Governance Structures. One of the things that we want to talk about first, fundamental insights, and that's point 1 and point 2 of that section A. Section 3, Section A, Section 1 and 2, point 1 and 2, is that the IOCC uses a model of church and of governance that's been time tested. Throughout the centuries, throughout the years, the church has experimented, has struggled with, has worked hard to develop a governance structure that is solid and strong. And this has gone on for millennia now. We've looked back at some of the oldest churches in existence and some of their strengths and weaknesses, and together within the IOCC we have pulled together what we feel is the best of those processes to develop what is now the IOCC. And it's important to note, especially in the ISM, this is a big problem within the ISM, is that people believe that just because we are independent, that somehow means that we also have no governance, no structure, no laws or regulations that we have to follow. And that's simply just not true. There may be some churches out there where that's the model, and I've known of churches out there where that is the model. A model that they use is a model of anything goes. Whatever they floats their fancy that day. That can't work, and it doesn't work. More times than not, it ends in utter disaster. And so there has to be kind of a middle ground that we can reach. There has to be a middle ground between no governance and too much governance. And one of the things on the other end of no governance, of course, is too much governance, which is micromanagement. And we've all known, whether it be in various churches we've been in or jobs in the public sector, we've known bosses, we've known bishops, we've known clergy who micromanage their clergy or micromanage their workers. And that's not a tactic, that's not a structure that can be maintained long. And that's because eventually it breaks down. It demoralizes the people underneath you, and it makes them feel as though they are not competent to do what you've asked them to do. If you've got to constantly stand over their shoulder, directing them what they need to do, then they feel that they're not able to accomplish anything, and they shut down. And that's very true within the ISM especially. So there has to be a balance, a middle of the road where between too much governance and not enough. And in the IOCC, we believe we've struck that middle chord. And how we've struck that middle chord is each of our dioceses operate as its own church for the most part. It functions on the day-to-day life of the church without need of the national church's involvement. Now, the national church stands ready and willing and able to help in any situation that diocese may face, but only when called upon by the diocese. It's not our job to go in and do things for them, to tell them how to run it. But rather, it's our job to keep an eye on things, and if they need help, we provide it. Now, in the case where there may be serious or gross neglect, abuse, or impropriety, the national church does have the right within canon law to step in and say, there is a problem here, it must be addressed. But it's a canon that we use very sparingly, and only in those cases where there is something desperately wrong in the diocese. Now, most of the time you'll never have to deal with that, because the people in the diocese will rise up and say, there's a problem in our diocese, please help us. And we never have to deal with that. But there may be the rare case, and so that's there in canon law in case it's necessary. But the rest of the time, the diocese operates on its own. Currently, a lot of power is invested in the national church because a lot of the offices of the national church run key aspects of the church universal. For instance, the Office of Staffing and Vocations runs the entire Commission on Ordained Ministry for the worldwide church. That is because at this time, the dioceses in the church are not large enough to sustain their own commission. As the dioceses grow, and there are plenty of clergy and laity that can help staff those offices will be divested into the diocese. And then each diocese will have its own commission on ordained ministry that will vet, using the minimum standards set by the national church. They will vet each and every candidate for vocations and make a decision on them there within their own diocese. And the bishops will be able to then operate pretty much without any oversight from the national level within their diocese when it comes to who they bring in as clergy and who they don't. Currently, once the Commission on Ordained Ministry approves a candidate, that candidate's then sent back to their bishop for training and the processes towards ordination. The bishop then determines when ordination is appropriate. You get the idea. But the works of the commission will eventually be divested into the dioceses themselves as they grow large enough. My office, the Office of Communications and Media Relations, is the one office and the only office, besides the office of the Archbishop, that will not have its authority divested into the diocese. And there's a reason for that. Now, there will be liaisons to the dioceses. There will be offices of communication and media relations within each diocese. However, those liaisons do not work solely without the oversight of the OCMR, and that's because when presenting the public face of the church, it is important that both national, diocesan, and local parishes operate within a sequence, that they all stay on the same page, they all say the same thing, and they're consistent. And that, for those wanting to know more about that, we'll get into that in another video at some point about the OCMR and what we do and how we're structured. But as for this study, that's all you need to know, is the OCMR operates little offices in each diocese, but they are headed by the national OCMR, and the national OCMR makes all the decisions, especially when it comes to media relations, outside media. And that's set by policy within the church. But anyway, that's another discussion for another day. Two insights gained from these experiences are fundamental for the governance of the church into the third millennium, which we're already in. And one of those is shared responsibility and corresponding freedom are at the heart of being human, both individually and communally. And the second is the most effective means of arriving at an ever fuller understanding of reality is done through dialogue, which should be carried out both within the church and with those outside of the church. And that's important to understand, that shared responsibility, we throw no one under the bus. The national church is not in the business of throwing anyone under the bus, and no one in the diocese should throw anyone in the national church under the bus. We're all in this together, and when you make a decision as a bishop or a priest, your decision affects the entire church. And that should be thought about before you make any major decisions. How will this not just affect my parish, but how will this affect everyone else as well? And the second thing is the dialogue within our church. That's one of the things that makes our church unique. We don't stifle dialogue. If someone has a concern, someone has something they want to talk about, someone has something that they feel needs to be changed, they are free to bring it up. We will discuss it. We'll even discuss it in front of everyone else if necessary. We have a tremendous number of channels for communication. We have an internal group within Facebook that is just for the clergy of the church, from deacons all the way through to the presiding bishop, where we discuss things on an almost instant basis, where if there's an issue that needs to be addressed, it can be addressed immediately. There are list servers that are available so that our clergy can communicate church-wide with everyone who's a clergy person in the church. And of course, the Archbishop, myself as Chancellor, and any of the bishops and clergy in the church should be available 24/7 if you need help. And that's important too. Communication is important in the church. Without proper communication between everyone in the church, the structure destabilizes and collapses. That's not to say that we've not had our moments. We've had moments where communication has been an issue. But we learn from those, and we've implemented plans to help overcome those issues so that they don't occur in the future. And that's important too, is to learn from our mistakes. One of the things that you have to understand about the church, and this is the church worldwide and the church locally, is that the church is a community, and it should always be looked at as a community. And the most basic unit of that community is, of course, its members. Without the laity, we are nothing. We don't function. Now, that's not to say that someone who doesn't have, 100 members in their parish doesn't have a ministry. In fact, there are people who have ministries over and above what sits in their chapel. Many of our clergy, the presiding bishop, myself, record and live broadcast masses, vespers, and various other divine offices for an adoration for people to view who are not right there with us at that time. And those people are part of our community too. While it's not necessarily a community of people right there in the room with you, they are a community because they come together and they share that important communal moment with us. And that's important. And even those who work as chaplains have a community. They have a community of people that they minister to day in and day out. One of my deacons here in the Diocese of the Southeast focuses his ministry entirely on chaplaincy. And that ministry is just as valid as someone who has a 200 parishioner parish. In fact, that ministry may have 200 people, but they don't sit in the pew every Sunday. They're there when they need it most. As I've told people before, I've experienced the best church when sitting in the Waffle House at 2 a.m. in the morning, surrounded by a bunch of people who just got out of bars. And those people come to me broken and needy and wanting something different in their lives, wanting to find the Savior, wanting to find the path of redemption. Those are the moments when we participate in church. That's just as much church as when we present the body and blood of Christ on the altar on Sunday morning. And to neglect those moments, or to shun those moments, or to say those moments are not important, is to do a great disservice to the church worldwide. Because those are the moments when the Spirit moves the most. That being said, most of what I've just discussed flows us from point 1 of principles to point 2 of principles, which talks about how that some of the community that we have are not limited to a geographic diocese. And that's very true when broadcasting masses, and broadcasting vespers, or holy hour, or things of that nature, or when having visiting people come in. That's also important. Now, right now, there are not the regional communions that the Constitution calls for, or multinational communions at the moment. The multinational being mostly what the international church itself does. But they're not regional communions at this time. At some point in the future, we'd love to see get-togethers where various dioceses come together and have convocations, have picnics and get-togethers and training exercises, things where multiple dioceses can come together and work. Kind of a regional symposium. We'd love to see that in the future, and as dioceses grow, hopefully we'll